Hey guys, in this video we'll be looking at a very simple method of deploying your own copy of VDO.Ninja. Now this is going to let you do things like style the app, change images, let you hard code default settings. You don't have to have everything as a URL parameter if you want certain settings. You can host your own domain. So if you don't want to use VDO.Ninja, you can change that out to your own domain name. You can also do things like specify your own custom turn server. Now, whether you want to host your own turn server or use a third party, you can do that with this method. We're not going to go into detail on deploying such server applications. This is just going to focus on the front-end client code. So it's a very simple method, and for most users, this method will achieve what they want. Okay, and the best part is all this will be free and pretty simple. So to get started, we have VDO.Ninja, and what we want to do is we want to sign into GitHub. Okay, I created a fake GitHub account or a new GitHub account for this demo, just something unused. But then the notion is we want to go to the VDO.Ninja GitHub repo while we're signed in to our GitHub account. So I've signed in and created a GitHub account, and now I'm going to go to github.video.ninja, and that will forward us to the GitHub repo. So that if you want to go the address that way, it's also github.com/stevesagan/video.ninja. And this is the GitHub repo. There's install instructions right here. If you want to do your own more advanced installation, we have details on how to do it through Nginx, SSL, how to deploy your own turn server, things like that. That's going to be out of the scope of this tutorial. We're going to be using a simpler method than that particular install file. To get started, all we have to do is we have to go up here to the top right, and we click fork. Right, it's going to ask us for a repository name, and we can just hit create fork. You do need to be signed in to GitHub for this to work, right? And what's going to happen is GitHub is going to create a copy of our repository. So now you'll see that it's called versus.cam/video.ninja. So my name or the GitHub account name /video.ninja. So this is a copy or a fork of the repository of the code. Now, every time I make a change to the original repository, that change does not automatically propagate. You can press fetch upstream anytime, and it will synchronize with my code and update your code. Now, GitHub does something called a merge, where it will try to add my code, my new code, to any code that you've changed. Most cases, it will work fine. In some cases, you'll have something called a merge conflict, and you'll have to correct the conflict. That's out of the scope of this topic. For the majority of people, you can just hit fetch upstream, and as long as you don't make any significant changes to the code base, there should be few conflicts. Okay. So why do we have a GitHub page? How does this help us? Well, GitHub has a feature built in that lets us host our code as a website. And because VDO.Ninja is like 99% website code, there's no active server code for the vast majority of what it is. Like there are some server components like the turn server, the handshake, the stun server, things like that. But for the vast majority of use cases and for users, those aspects aren't needed. You can just ignore those for now. Regardless, VDO.Ninja is a web app. It doesn't compile. You don't have to do things like npm, yarn build. You don't have to run a compiler installer. The code can run just as a website. And so that gives us this really neat advantage where we can just go to settings here. We can click on pages from the menu here, okay? And then we can just select a folder, a branch. Now there's different versions of VDO.Ninja. They're like branches, master, and sometimes I have development branches, but master is the main branch. So for the vast majority of users, you'd want to select master. If you want the current stable version, I usually list the last stable version. And sometimes I might also list the current beta version. It's up to you what you want. You can even make your own branch. That's out of the scope of this, I guess. For now, let's just hit master and we'll hit save. So far, all we did is, again, go to settings, pages. We selected master as our source. If you check out other GitHub repos, sometimes it's called main. They switched master to main as a term about a year or two ago. But master, and we don't need to worry about anything else. We don't need to choose a theme. There's no theme needed. And what GitHub has done is they have created a hosted copy of our site for us. This is our address, and we just have to keep refreshing. And after a few minutes, finally, it updates. So there we go. It took us about 3 minutes of just waiting, of me rambling. And now versus cam.github.io/VDO.Ninja is now a website. And everything is set up. We have SSL set up. It's secure with an SSL certificate that's valid. We don't have to do any DevOps. We don't have to do any hosting of Nginx or Amazon or whatever. It's all being done for free. Now, for example, I can allow my camera. Let's see. Select. Here we go. We select this. We paste it into this link. And we see that the video has worked. Right? So we have our own domain, and VDO.Ninja, the functionality is working. You'll notice that by default, if it's not the VDO.Ninja domain, I hide all the branding. So I don't say add your camera to OBS. I just say add your camera. Currently, we're running master, which is at the moment version 22 beta. If we wanted to run the stable version, so a version that's stable, we can find a branch that's more stable, or we can create our own branch and do that. And we can select it and then save, and then we'll update. But for now, we're running 22 beta. Cool. Now, we might want to change this to our own domain name. And what we'll do now is we'll go through the steps to change that to our own domain name. We will need a domain name purchased, and we will put that in here. So I'm going to skip ahead to getting a domain name, and I'll be back in just a second. Okay, so let's enter video.versuscam.github.io. github.com. Okay, and we're going to hit save. GitHub has now pointed our repository to this domain name. Unfortunately, we haven't actually set up the DNS yet, the domain name services. So we have to go to our name server and fix that. Now, GitHub has provided some basic instructions here. We need to use this as the CNAME record, and we need to point our domain name that we specified here to this CNAME. So let me show you how to do that. So this is Namecheap.com, just one of the many domain name providers. GoDaddy, for example, is another option. I have a relatively new domain name here, and what I'm going to do is create a new record. I'm going to make it a CNAME record. Because I've chosen the name VDO.Versuscam, I'm going to put VDO here. But if I wanted it to be just versuscam.com, I could put the parent, or like the I guess it's the parent alias. In this case, it'd be an @ sign. So the host name in this case will be video, and then we put in the value that GitHub has provided us, which is versuscam.github.io. We can set the TTL to be whatever we want, really. I'll just leave it as automatic, and then we hit OK. So we have now set up our CNAME record for the subdomain video and the parent domain versuscam.com to point to the GitHub web servers. If we wanted to do it for the parent domain, it'd be we change this to CNAME, we leave that, and then we also do versus.cam, right? But I'm going to leave that redirect there. Okay. So we go back to our now if we check on GitHub again, we'll see that it's going to fail. This usually takes 20 to 30 minutes for that change we just made on our domain name provider to propagate. By that, I mean, when you make a change with anything related to DNS, it can sometimes take up to 48 hours for that change to propagate to all the other listening DNS servers out there. Sometimes it can take up to 48 hours, but what I find normally with Namecheap and GitHub, it takes about 20 minutes or so. So we'll just give it some time, 20 minutes, and then we'll hit check again, and we'll see what happens. So it should come back right away. So it took about 10 minutes, and I just tried clicking it again, and we now see that it says DNS check successful. The site is published to HTTP, video.versuscam.com. Now, that's not going to work for us. We need HTTPS. We need SSL. So what we need to do is we probably need to say enforce HTTPS. Sometimes it might say it needs to create an SSL certificate, and it's going to take a minute for that to happen on GitHub. But for us, it seems to have worked right away. We'll just refresh the page, and now we see that it says HTTPS. And when we go here, we don't have any error. And we also see that the domain name is video.versuscam.com. Allow, select our input, and boom, things work. Okay. So now we have hosted our own copy of the VDO.Ninja web app. When we go back to our main repository here, any changes we make to the repository will update to our website within a few minutes. So if I go to something called main.css, I can edit the style of the VDO.Ninja app here, colors, padding. These are all styles that we can modify for different parts of the app. Body is a common one. So all the body elements, there's lots of them. Table, The body at line 1209 here. This contains quite a bit as well. You can see that the background for the app is stored as a variable, meaning that if we go to the top, all the settings that you might want to change as defaults are generally listed here. Like video background images and things like that. Now we don't have to download anything. We can just click this little edit here and we can change the color. So I can do something as simple as saying red. I can use hex color, I can use RGB colors, and then I just hit save, commit. So we've made a change to our main CSS file. Now we see that there's an about section here. We can go in here and change that. And I can change the domain name to scam.com or VDO.Ninja. And this is just updating my personal copy, but just so I have a shortcut to the page, I can go here. Now, the site hasn't updated the cache yet. Sometimes you can do a hard refresh on the browser, but it's going to take a few minutes. So that CSS change has not updated yet, but it takes a few minutes usually for that to propagate. Other things that we can change, if we go into the media folder, we have things like the default background images. These are WebP images, but we can replace these with our own custom images for the virtual background. We can change quite a few things there. Other things we can change are in the index.html file. And this is where users who want to get more advanced will want to go next. We go to the bottom of this file, okay, at the bottom. And we'll see that there's a section starting around line 2000 where we can start specifying customizations that we might actually want. So we can set a default password for any sort of encryption. You can set that to something you want. That's not really all that important because you can specify it via the URL. This is in the case that you don't specify a password in the URL. We'll use a default one. So all that we can just kind of ignore. This section here, though, is pretty interesting. If you want to deploy your own turn server, the instructions for that are listed in the install.md file. But if you want to deploy your own turn server on Google or Amazon AWS, you can do that. And then you can specify your turn server settings here. If you want to use a third-party provider, you can also add code to specify your own turn servers and your own credentials here as well. That's more for advanced users. I'll probably do another video explaining how to do turn server setup. But just for reference, a basic turn server can be set up in this section. If you do not uncomment this section, it's going to use the default settings, which will be set to the VDO.Ninja public turn servers. Okay, so if you leave this the way it is commented out, it's going to use the default VDO.Ninja turn servers. If you uncomment this, it will use whatever you specify. And if you leave this section blank, it will use just the stun servers. The stun servers by default are using the Google ones. You can change that. You can deploy your own stun servers as well. Do whatever you want there. You can do things like uncomment this line, and it will force the turn servers to be used all the time. So if you're worried about privacy and your IP address being leaked out to a guest, and you have your own turn servers, and you don't mind paying for the bandwidth of that, this is a way of protecting some privacy, because the remote guests won't be able to see your IP address. If you want to deploy your own handshake server, this is the line you could do that here. Again, that's out of the scope of this video. There are some third-party providers out there if you don't want to host your own to do that as well. By default, it's going to use the default VDO.Ninja handshake servers. Now, there's quite a bit more you can configure here beyond these settings, but these are the ones that I think most users are going to want to modify. These are defaults that you can set. So you can set this variable to a parameter. If you want the audio to be always very high quality, you can set stereo equal to 1, for example, and that will, let's say, force pro audio mode to be enabled. It'd be like adding stereo or pro audio to the URL, but instead you can hard code it here. Same thing with the audio bit rates. The default quality, if you set this to 0, when guests join, they will automatically use 1080p rather than 720 as a default. You can set a default room ID. So when anyone visits your website, it's going to automatically put them into a room that you specify rather than giving them a choice. So if you don't want to have multiple rooms, if you just plan on your deployment having just one room all the time, you can specify that here. Dark mode, things like that. Now, one user asked to change the default images for that virtual virtual background effect. You can upload your own images to the media folder in GitHub in your repository. I pointed out these files just a moment ago in the media folder. You can upload your own images there, uncomment this line, and either replace or add your own link references to those images. And so when the app loads, assuming you have the virtual background effect enabled, you'll see your images as options there as defaults. Okay. Those are the main settings that I think most users are going to want to tinker with. At the bottom of the index file, as I mentioned, there are defaults you can set and the advanced settings. You might also want to modify the main CSS file. That's fine to enable. There are auxiliary tools for VDO.Ninja. Things like there's the Mixer app. There's like the stats page. There's quite a few examples in here for things like how to do chat, esports, a peer-to-peer example, how to do sensors, how to do MIDI, Zoom. If you want to host your own website and modify just an example for something that's not really VDO.Ninja, but maybe it's using the iframe API, you could do that. You can access the OBS remote example here. So for example, I can go example OBS remote, examples remote, and we can see that we can access this page. And then we can modify the code here, and we can modify our own custom OBS remote control. This is powered by VDO.Ninja using OBS's WebSocket server to let us remotely control OBS anywhere on the internet without having to worry about firewalls. And that code you can use, right? So you don't have to use VDO.Ninja for VDO.Ninja. You can still use this concept to host other sort of applications as well. Okay, one final thing is you have the translation files. So if you want to have your own custom text, you can go in here, and 90% of the text contained within VDO.Ninja is here. So like add your camera is all listed here. And you can go and modify that, and then it updates on the page. So we just refresh and we see that the CSS style has been updated. So that's the end of the video, guys. We looked at how to fork VDO.Ninja to your own GitHub repo, how to update and edit the code. We also showed how to use GitHub Pages to host it for free. And we looked at methods to edit the branding, style, and settings as needed. Advanced users can modify the index file to deploy their own turn servers and configure it there. I'll have to do another video in the future that actually goes through the more complete steps on how to actually deploy the turn server and potentially any other component for more advanced users. But for the vast majority of users, I think this is sufficient. I don't offer much support with deployments, development, customization. If there's a common request, though, I'll try to support it, or perhaps do a future YouTube video as well. Anyways, hopefully that helps, guys. I'm on Discord at discord.video.ninja, and yeah, take care.